We are not, in Canada at the present time, we are not contemplating arming the opposition in Syria. I fully understand why our allies would do that, particularly given recent actions by Russia, Iran, and others. But our aid at the present time and our aid for now will continue to be humanitarian aid.
Stephen Harper saying, yes, we are sending humanitarian aid, that's cash, to the Syrian rebels to help out all the people on the ground in Syria, not sending arms like the U.S. announced last week they will be doing. And President Putin of Russia continuing to support President Assad of Syria. Let's go to Toronto Sun columnist Tarek Fatah now. He joins us from our Toronto studios to help us figure out all the different players in this. Tarek, when we talk about rebels versus government forces, the rebels are not just one cohesive group. There's a lot of stuff going on there, isn't there?
Well, to be very frank, the main body of the rebels is the groups that are supported by Saudi Arabia and Qatar, and they are the jihadi Islamists. The rest of the drawing room politicians who gather at these aid conferences where they put forth programs to the Americans or to European Union, they're not there on the ground. Maybe 2 years ago they had some presence, but all of these are tiny little factions more interested in the billions that they expect to come than any other force. On the ground right now, you have a number of people recruiting from the Balkans, that's southern Europe, and in Russia's Muslim belt, there have been rebels that have been captured or killed with Pakistani identity cards. So this is the equivalent of the 21st century Spanish Civil War, where the Comintern is recruiting from all over the world to fight the government. So
but Tarek, why are people going from other countries to Syria? It's not their country.
They don't see countries as countries. From their perspective, this is a worldwide jihad in which every Muslim has to give his or her life to establish a universal caliphate. They see Western society as essentially evil or satanic. And this is not what I'm saying. This is what's evidence on the ground when people rip open dead prisoners of war, take out their body parts and eat them in front of running television cameras. You're not dealing with normal people. You're dealing with cannibals.
Tarek, I've got a board up on the screen here. It's showing a whole bunch of opposition groups: Syrian National Council, Muslim Brotherhood, Damascus Declaration Bloc, a paramilitary group, the Free Syrian Army, which Toronto woman Thwaiba Kanafani has gone to several times to fight with them. I understand what you're saying, that the more extremist groups, the groups with something to gain, with the heart and the passion, the religious zeal, are the ones who are going to rise to the top. But David Cameron says that in supplying arms, you can pick out the pluralist Democrat groups. And those are the groups you're going to give arms to. Those are the ones who are going to thrive, and they are going to suppress the extremist groups. Is there any sense to what he's saying? Will that narrative triumph?
None whatsoever. I mean, David Cameron is also, catering to the vote banks in urban Western countries, and they've been extremely dangerous in what they're doing. They don't have the vision of the Churchillian era. They don't have any concept of what sort of a civilizational war we are in. They have no concept of who they are dealing with. They're looking at the Syrian conflict from the prism of conference tables. This is not something that will ever go on our side. We've seen what happened in Libya. We've seen what happened with the American intervention in Iraq. Now,
so basic idea in Libya, we all thought, oh, it's wonderful, they're rebels against a dictator, they're using Twitter, only virtuous, hip Western people use the Twitter. Suddenly, wait a second, ascendancy of Muslim Brotherhood, is that the same sort of narrative that we can see happening in Syria in the resolution?
Far worse. Libya is what Syria would be Syria light. In Libya, you ended up getting the American ambassador killed, and dozens of firefights going on around the country, with about 10,000 missiles missing from the country. Imagine what's going to happen if President Obama and David Cameron's plans unfold. I am so glad that we have a prime minister in this country who understands I think Canada is the only country who really understands the implication of what could go wrong. If this was 2 years ago, and the Americans could have intervened at that time to make sure that there was a ceasefire, there was a no-fly zone, and that Assad would be given safe passage out, I would have said, fine, there are drawing room politicians in Syria who could resolve this. These guys are nowhere there. They're basically there to skim the money that is being raised in billions by the European Union and the United States.
Tarek, I got to let you go in a second, but before I do, I got to ask a rather harrowing question. Obama arming people in Syria, is he inadvertently arming the next Osama bin Laden, say?
Of course he is. And he's being influenced by the Muslim Brotherhood folks that he has installed within the White House and his own administration. That's where he's getting this advice.
Tarek, that's thank you for your assessment, but that's obviously very, very alarming news, something for us to keep an eye on. Folks, that's Tarek Fatah joining us from Toronto.